I'll call together the Economic Development Communications Committee meeting, the open portion, for today, 3rd of March. Mostly, well, it is almost all via Zoom. We don't need to co-opt a committee member. We have apologies from Alderman Zuko, Councillor Fox, and I suspect Alderman Sexton will join us very soon. There we are. Hi, Peter. So if someone could confirm the minutes of the meeting of the open portion Thursday, the 3rd of February. Thanks, Mike. I'll put that to the vote. All those who see those as a true and correct record, say aye. Aye. Thank you. Anybody against? And I'll declare that they are carried as the minutes. Consideration of supplementary items, there aren't any, and I'm aware of anyway. Indications of pecuniary conflicts of interest on the open agenda. Thank you. Any transfer of an agenda items to be closed?
Chair, is there room for a co-opt?
Well, I'd like to co-opt you, Bill. I'm sure there is. We're under our normal number.
I'm happy to be co-opted if someone would be brave enough to move that.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Dutta. I'll put that to the vote that we co-opt Councillor Harvey. All those in favour? Aye. Thank you. So we go, so you're co-opted, Councillor Harvey, thank you. The first item, there's two reports. One is the City of Hobart's role in supporting the Antarctic Centre. We have a detailed report, and I'll open it by asking perhaps Ms. Knott to perhaps give us a briefing on the report that's been prepared. Thanks, Lucy.
Thank you, Chair. This report essentially answers a report that was taken to the Economic Development and Communications Committee in October. And the part of the resolution from that October meeting was that a report will be brought back to the Council highlighting proposals to more strategically align to the City's activities with respect to its link to Antarctica and the Antarctic industry in Tasmania. So this report essentially answers that resolution in providing some more meat on the bones. So there are a number of aspects that this report covers, and it looks really at the role of the City of Hobart as one of 5 Antarctic gateways. It looks at effectively the results of that Antarctic Cities project, and that was something that was presented to this committee just before Christmas. It also looks at our interaction with the TAG, which is the Tasmanian Antarctic Gateway Advisory Committee. So there are effectively a number of ways of expanding our role, and this report goes through those quite methodically.
Thank you. I'll open the item for discussion.
Chairman, I'm happy to, I don't know, has this been moved?
No, not yet.
I'm happy to move the recommendations. I do note part 4, that the officers attend the Tasmanian Antarctic Gateway Advisory Committee meeting to discuss the concept of referring to Hobart as a custodian rather than a gateway. We did touch upon that at the previous meeting that considered this item. And while as I said at the time, I'm perfectly happy for it to be called whatever, the custodian has a very different concept and very different level of responsibility to gateway. Custodian implies that we have some authority or some responsibility to defend or support or do something for Antarctic. And I guess before we change the terminology, as I said back when we considered it some months ago, I hope that discussion that the officers are going to undertake does consider any responsibilities that we may acquire as a consequence of becoming a custodian as opposed to a gateway. And I don't want us to have just a meaningless title of custodian and then say, oh, it's nothing to do with us when things go wrong, or somebody says, hang on, you're a custodian, so you better, put your hand in your pocket and sort this out. So, apart from that one comment, I'm happy to move the recommendations as they appear on the record.
Chair, if I can, Yeah, I think Alderman Sexton, you're quite right. It's a very important point, and that is one of the reasons why we want to go and talk to the TAG members. It is a collection of the key stakeholders in this sector, and we don't know where they sit with this term either. So absolutely the intent is to go to this meeting is about having a discussion, not really to table a proposal per se, but is to have hopefully a meaningful dialogue about, well, how does that title sit? It's a recommendation that has come out of a significant academic study based on a high degree of community engagement, but at the end of the day, with the stakeholders involved in this space, how does that actually sit as a significant change in language as you've identified?
Chair?
Thank you. Yes, thanks, Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, look, I think it's an important point, whether to be the gateway or the custodians, but I do think there is a difference, and I think the use of the word custodians for me demonstrates a commitment, rather than where the gateway, go via Hobart. The custodian responsibility for me is not just about protecting the ice, but protecting the things on the way to the ice. It's protecting the biodiversity that we will lose in the next couple of generations, and understanding the sciences of climate change. So being custodians of the planet and custodians of Antarctica is a big responsibility. It's something we're already doing. And I went to a forum, the IPCC release of the 6th report the other night, and it's quite clear that the Antarctic is a living gem, but it's also under enormous threat. And for us to be custodians, I think, is very worthy in our efforts to promote research and understanding about the threats to Antarctica in the coming decades. So I'm very comfortable actually switching from custodian to gateway, but if there needs to be further explanation. But I do have a lot of energy for the people who work in Antarctica and who are working to preserve something that could be very different in the next couple of decades, with climate change coming at us, and also with the exploitation of natural resources in the Arctic area, such as harvesting krill. So very keen to be as strong as we possibly can as custodians to look after the future of Antarctica for the planet, as much as we can through our science and research that's already well established in the region.
Councillor Dutta.
I simply endorse what Councillor Harvey has said, and I think he has made some valid points. Thank you.
Look, I'm glad it's going to a further meeting, because whilst I'm heartened by what Councillor Harvey has just said about activities we're doing, but like Alderman Sexton, I have a difficulty just because we are a shipping port or a point of departure. What makes us any different to Fremantle, which is also a departure point, or Launceston, or anywhere? And I also think that the word custodian does have those implications, and of course the federal government is probably prepared to spend multi-millions of dollars to preserve something and everything to do with the Antarctica, for a geopolitical reason, also for environmental reasons. So I'm really finding it hard to understand where, just because we are the last port of call, we suddenly become a custodian as distinct from a gateway city. And the other thing is, although I appreciate it's got to come back, we've got to find another second sponsor, I'm not sure what the Antarctic Youth Ambassador would be doing, and I guess that links back again to that issue of custodians. What are we as a city? We've always supported, and I think we're really lucky to have the Antarctic Polar Network, because that's actually helps our economy, and obviously it's valuable to have it so close to the Antarctic. But as I said, the fact that we have a federal government that is hugely involved with the Antarctic continent, we're a port along the way. But I appreciate that 4 definitely indicates it's going to go back for further discussions about what indeed custodianship means. At the moment, I'm not comfortable with it.
I think, through you, Chairman, we're more than a gateway. A gateway implies we'd be happy for the tuna boats to come through Hobart and refuel. A gateway implies that we'd be happy for the cruise ships to come through and refuel, empty their toilets and sail off into the Arctic. So I think custodian gives us a much more powerful approach to how we look at the Antarctic, that we're not just, you know, the airport on the stopover on the way, but we're actually a place that provides education and support for science and technology, and is the home of the best icebreaker in the world.
I wholeheartedly agree with Councillor Harvey, absolutely. I mean, but as I said before, we have to understand the scope of whatever it is we're promising in terms of becoming a custodian. So although research is done within our city, we don't do it. And we don't really support it to any great extent. There's certainly no major funding that comes from the City of Hobart for Antarctic research. So I guess the people that are doing this is, as the Chairman said, largely the big funders, federal government, state government, other funding agencies. And while we can complain if a cruise ship comes into the City of Hobart and then steams off down to the Antarctic, I'm not 100% sure what we can actually do about it. Now, if we can do something about it, then I'd like to know what that is, and I guess that's the sort of discussion that we need to have in the context of what it means to become a custodian, what powers do we have, what authority do we have. You know, if we don't want tuna boats coming into Hobart, can we actually do anything about it? Etc., etc. Otherwise, it's a gesture, nothing more than a gesture, and I don't see any point in making just changing a word to be a gesture. If we can actually do something constructive and have the authority and the power to do it, then absolutely, very happy to be a custodian with a specified scope of action.
I think because it's going to this other committee for further discussion, as long as the officers are taking some notes of this discussion. I mean, I'll pose a hypothetical. So the federal government puts out a tender for $1 million for any Australian city to become a custodian of the Antarctic. So can someone explain to me why we would have a preferential right there in terms of why would someone look at Hobart and say, oh, Hobart's going to kill Melbourne? Is it because of the Antarctic science research that's done here? But that's pretty well, as you've just said, Alderman Sexton, divorced from the city itself. So I just think that's an issue you should think about. If there was a competitive bid by the federal government for a custodian city, would Hobart immediately get that role? And why would it get that role?
Chairman, anyway. I don't agree that we're divorced from the research institutes. People come to Hobart because of the lifestyle. People come to Hobart because of the institutions that exist here that have been developed over generations. They come to live in a city that's not like any other city. That's a small scale city that is at the cutting edge of science. And the Hobart Council's support for science and education, and we've got an MOU, or not an MOU, sorry, but we've got arrangements across time with the university. It exists in a number of pages in our inner city precinct plan and other documents with regard to the university. So we've been encouraging of science and education for a long time in Hobart, and IMAS and CSIRO and the Antarctic Division all play an important role that we are collaborating with by the way we run the city, the way we acknowledge those institutions. So anyway, I guess it's, you'll get a more fulsome answer from the committee hopefully, but I'm not going to continue arguing the toss, but I do think there's some excellent connections that we have with research, and because of the very nature of Hobart its location, its physicality, with its proximity to the docks and the research vessels that operate out of here. I think there's a very strong sense that we could be considered to be custodians, because we do a lot of this work, and we're doing that work in order to protect these ecosystems and these species for future generations. So happy to be a custodian.
No, I very well argued, thank you. We're not having an argument, Bill, we're having a discussion.
Yeah.
Can this not just explain what this youth ambassador would do, please, in terms of a daily or weekly activity?
Thank you, Chair. So as part of the Antarctic Cities project, a youth ambassador was selected from each of the Antarctic gateway cities through a competitive process. And when each of those 5 ambassadors were selected, they actually travelled to Antarctica just prior to COVID-19. During their time on the stations in Antarctica, the group got together and they were facilitated by the project directors from the University of Western Sydney and University of Tasmania to actually come up with strategic goals and objectives. So they've worked that up pretty well. And there's a link from your report to the Antarctic Youth Ambassadors website. So just to read for everyone's ease, they have 3 strategic goals. The first one is it is to build youth engagement networks in the 5 gateway cities. And as came out of the Antarctic Cities report, one of perhaps the weakest part of the feeling of engagement between the cities and Antarctica was the youth. And I think, as we all know, the youth really is the future. If they don't feel connected to Antarctica, then it's survival. I think you could really classify as fairly weak, the chances of survival. So the next strategic goal was to create new connections between the Antarctic cities. So that's actually something that was part of the resolution for the Lord Mayor to connect with the Mayor of Christchurch. So that's something already on our agenda, and the Antarctic Youth Ambassadors will be supporting that council aim. And the third one is around custodianship, so fostering a sense of Antarctic custodianship in these cities, but particularly in the young people. So I think whatever your opinion is of the third strategic goal, 1 and 2 certainly fit in with Council's direction in supporting the Antarctic sector.
Thank you very much, that's excellent. Alderman Spector, you've moved the motion. Is there any, the recommendation, is there anybody else who wants to say anything else? And we'll put that. All right, I'll put the recommendation by Alderman Sexton. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
So moving to the second item, which is basically an update on international relations. And first of all, thanks Ms. Knott for putting that together. I'll open that item for debate.
Chairman, just one comment. It says here that investigations into the potential new relationships with City of Juri in Nepal and Kochi in India and Incheon, South Korea, be placed on hold and reviewed in September 22. Good idea to delay it, but the only issue, I guess, really is that we're going to have a new council in October, November, and I'm just wondering, for the sake of a couple of months, whether it's worthwhile waiting until the new council is formed before council, which will be the final arbiter, actually makes a decision. So I'm just wondering whether, through you to whomever, is there any particular reason why September is so important, or could it be done in November to give the new council an opportunity to consider it?
Through you, Chair, no, that's a very good suggestion, Alderman Sexton. I think really September was arbitrary. It was a further 6 months down the track. We're of the view that we'll have done more work on the new economic development thinking by that stage. But absolutely, these decisions are so important for elected members to be involved in that there is no reason why it can't be put off until after the election.
I think that's
in that case, Chairman, is it worthwhile just to change the wording from reviewed in September 22 to reviewed as soon as possible after the 2022 Local government elections.
I think that's an excellent idea. Are you prepared to move the recommendation with that change?
I am.
Thank you. Councillor Dutta and Councillor Harvey?
Chair, I don't mind either way. It'll be mostly the same council after the election anyway. I can't see there being a wild, election where everyone's turfed out and a new bunch take control of the council, who then, decide that international relations are not core business of council. We can fill potholes with that money rather than, worry about international relations. So I can't see that occurring. But I just would like to comment on the Ballybow project. That I think, when was the year, Lucy, that we visited Timor-Leste?
Through you, Chair, 2017.
2017, so that's now 5 years ago. It was pre-COVID, and it was also the global growth in desire to get rid of single-use plastics. So, we were at a time in Timor-Leste when we might have made a huge difference on the back of what we've done in Hobart and things. But I'd like to think that we can not just kick this to the curb, but that there's still an opportunity to work with Timor-Leste. And now there's a lot more foundations who are working in that region that we might be able to link up with as well. So I'd like to keep an eye on the Ballybow plastics project. I don't know what's changed in Ballybow. Do you have any intel, Lucy, on things that have shifted in Ballybow since 2017?
Through you, Chair, actually it was early January. It was January 2018, so I stand corrected.
Yep.
Councillor Harvey, I've monitored what's going on in Timor-Leste from a COVID-19 perspective, but I have to confess, I haven't, probably in the last 6 months or so, I haven't been particularly across what's happening in the plastics area.
Yep, okay. But there has been a huge amount of effort across the globe to try and limit plastics since our trip to Ballybow. And as we speak, there's a global conference happening. I think it's in Nairobi, to look at a motion to introduce a global binding treaty on plastics. Australia supports that treaty, as well as I think most countries in the world. But there's big pushback from industry to say, well, we don't want to limit our plastic production because we make a lot of money out of it. So it'd be very, very interesting times for plastic. And we did have a head start on this. And I'd like to think that at some point in the future, we can re-look at how we can collaborate with Ballybow to help them, or for them to engage with us in ways we can be of assistance.
Chairman, just to clarify, my amendment didn't include Timor-Leste. It was just the new relationship. So, from my perspective, I think it's perfectly reasonable that the council receive a report back from staff, seeing as this is an ongoing and pre-established project in September 2022. So I'm perfectly happy for that to remain. It was just the new relationships that I was more concerned about.
Okay, yep.
Councillor Dutta, and we've also had the Lord Mayor, so welcome, Lord Mayor.
Yeah, I am happy to go along with the suggestion made that we do after elections. Thank you.
Chair, you're on mute.
Sorry, Lord Mayor, this is the item on international relations. Until you joined, we've moved it to be a report back to the council as soon as possible after the new council is sworn in. Can I just make a couple of comments? And look, unfortunately, the Lord Mayor wasn't able to join, but the Lord Mayor had suggested that in the previous item, we used the word gateway city and custodial city, so that can be considered as when that matter comes back after that separate meeting. Two things in relation to this. I think it's important, considering we do have a new administration to be sworn in. This report will be the first one that someone will go back to, and yet it fails to consider, it fails to even mention the other Chinese city, Xi'an, in the report. So as long as when it comes back to the council, there is a full report, which just because we have a delicate relationship issue, there's no doubt that Xi'an was very keen to renew that relationship. That relationship wasn't able to bring much together in the time it's been there, but it is one of the most critical cities in China, and we are the only Australasian, we're the only South Pacific country or place which has a city which has a relationship with Xi'an. So I just asked that be noted in the next report. Now, in terms of Incheon, if you were reading this report, you would not necessarily get the gist that the Korean government is actually very keen on Incheon because it's the Antarctic gateway. Maybe it's the custodian city for Korea, who knows? It's very keen that we do have a relationship with Incheon. The difficulty arose is that the council, the city of Hobart, went straight to the Incheon council, which considered that it was too big a regional council to be playing with a small place like Hobart, but the federal government, and it suggested another council within the Incheon region. But the Korean government is very keen that we have that sister city relationship, and indeed the Tasmanian government is likewise extremely keen, as is the university, that Hobart does pursue Incheon. The ambassador's office for the Korean embassy will make the correct approaches, Lucy, when time's appropriate. But it's really important that the notes of this meeting reveal or record the fact that Incheon is an extremely hot prospect because of that Antarctic connection, but it would be with this major provincial city of Incheon, which is also where a lot of the foreign universities are situated as well. So it's a powerful site within the Korean Peninsula. I'll just make that comment, that's all. Is somebody prepared to move this, or has someone moved it? I can't remember.
Alderman Sexton already has, Chair.
Is there anybody else who wants to make a comment on this item? Put the item. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Hence, then the item's carried. Then I move now to, I guess it's our status report. I'm just lost in my agenda. Status report. Committee action status report.
Happy to move that.
Thank you. I'll put that to the meeting. All those in favour of accepting as stated? Aye. Questions without notice on the open? There be, sorry, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Yeah, just a question around whether the city has investigated the use of credit card data for understanding city use numbers, like foot traffic and just, I guess, use of the city from credit card data and retail trends. I understand other capital cities purchase and track this data. And related is the use of de-identified mobile phone data to understand and analyse the areas that of the city people are using, which again I understand both Melbourne and Geelong are doing this kind of collecting this kind of city data.
Take that on notice, Chair.
Very much. Any further questions without notice? Then do we need a vote to go into closed, or we can just go straight in?
We do, Chair. We need a vote.
Happy to move.
Thank you. I think Alderman Sexton